world's changed. And you are right in the center of it.
I don't know what's ahead, but all bets are off.
Topic number one, UFC 252 is now in the books. Daniel Cormier loses a unanimous decision across the board. I think it was 249-46 148-47 to Stipe Miocic. BC, let's start with you, my dearest friend. I'm going to ask the question this way. All people can seem to talk about is the eye poke that happened, I believe, at the end of the third round. Because of it, can you still call Stipe the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time?
You're damn right you can, Luke. And I know I'm not going to do what you all think I'm going to do, which is come out here and bring up the eye poke and try to say that Stipe didn't win this, right? Daniel lost it. No, the third time's a charm. Crown him. Stipe is what he is, the greatest heavyweight in UFC history. And if he can continue this run, oh, by the way, may be able to creep up on Fedor in that conversation as well, because this resume is sick. Yes, he's won certain fights with intangibles, Luke, but this specific fight, I thought he won with his intelligence, his adjustments, and his stamina. He was a perfect heavyweight fighter in there on this night. But let's bring up that eye poke. Here's where I say Daniel Cormier, a guy that I love. You know that. I love me some DC. He doesn't have a leg to stand on this argument. And I'm not necessarily saying that he was attempting to. He said in the post-fight interview, it is what it is. I couldn't see out of the eye. It was black. But you lose the right to complain about it or have even your supporters lean on that when you have a history. Now, did this eye poke potentially affect the outcome of this third fight? Absolutely. But when you have a history of poking Stipe so bad in the first two fights that he needed surgery after the second one and had his career kind of up for grabs of whether he would continue, and then you come out in round one, as Cormier did, and I poke him one more time, I'm sorry, you lose the benefit of the doubt. You lose all of that. That's kind of like fighting karma in a weird way, coming back to bite you. And, Luke, it is what it is.
Hold on. Let me just make sure. Hold on. I'm going to make sure. I'm going to pitch it right back to you. Just to be clear, it's karma that he got poked in the eye.
I'm not going to go to the death on the karma thing, but when you have a history of doing that and you get away with it, and in some cases it may have helped you win, although obviously he lost that rematch, it's going to come back to you. It was an accident. I'm not saying he purposely trying to foul people, but when you do this, it comes back on you. When Oscar De La Hoya got robbed against Tito Trinidad, he lost his case to argue because he ran the last 3 rounds. He gave up the opportunity to fight on his way out. I just think in this specific case, not that I think DC's leaning on that, but even his supporters can't lean on that. He's got a history of doing that to Stipe, including in this damn fight. So it happened against him. That's some random bad luck, but it is what it is at the end of the day, Luke.
Yeah, I mean, here's the view I take and thinking about it a little bit longer, which is, number one, I do not personally, I'm not suggesting that's exactly what you're saying, but people being like, oh, fuck DC, this is karma, this is what he gets for poking DC in the eye. You had to be a sort of disturbed person to wish, blinding on a fighter, because, yes, he could have, there's no denying over the course of 3 fights, DC obviously could have exercised greater caution. That is without debate. Second of all, I'm going to start putting some blame on the referees. How many eye pokes did DC have, some worse than others, of course, where he didn't get a single point taken across 3 fights? 3 fights and not 1 point taken. He had an eye poke in all of them. And again, some are going to be worse than others. I don't think this one was as bad as the one maybe in the first fight. Again, who's to know? We'd have to ask Stipe. But the point being is just that. You gotta be kidding me that they never did anything about it. And of course, guys are not going to exercise as much discipline as they should if the referees are never enforcing it. So they have to take a long look in the mirror here and ask themselves how in 3 fights we got 4 eye pokes and guys had to get surgery on one end, and so far it looks like DC might not have to get surgery, but he might have to as well. I look squarely on the officiating crew for that, not just each one, but all of them in totality. And that's sort of my broader point about the eye poke, BC. It's that if you count, what have they fought? Roughly 10 rounds, right? 3 and some change in the second one, nearly a round in the first one. So more or less 10 rounds. In 10 rounds, who sustained the most amount of eye damage? It is probably Stipe Miocic. In aggregate, he got poked in every single one of those intervals. That sounded a little weird, but you know what I mean, in the eye. And so the point being here is, as bad as that, I think DC's singular eye poke for that moment in time was probably worse than any individual eye poke that Stipe had to deal with. But Stipe had to deal with it as a constant problem over the course of 10 rounds. And so for those reasons, it's like, do I think it played a role? I don't see how it didn't on either end. But one guy in aggregate got it much worse than the other. DC is right. It just kind of is what it is. So
but look, I don't think it's bad to use the term karma and necessarily mean you're like wishing it upon somebody. Like Canelo Alvarez in boxing. He's got a long history of giving the benefit of the doubt in close fights. One of these fights, Luke, our eyes will tell us he has won it, and he's going to get the scorecards against him. And at that point, we'll be like, it's kind of cosmic combat karma coming back on you. Doesn't mean people are with a voodoo doll wishing it on him, but I think that's the case with DC, because Luke, I'm going to ask you this question. If there had been no history of eye pokes between them, and this third fight went the way it did with the one eye poke, Stipe against DC, I think we would be talking afterwards, hey man, the ref missed that. Maybe we should do a fourth fight or something because DC was severely compromised the last, 2+ rounds. But when you have that history, you lose that benefit of the doubt.
I think that's right. If this was a unique moment in time, we were dealing with that. There's no doubt in my mind. I don't know that the commission would be receptive to it, because the commission circles the wagons and never, ever asks themselves, what could we do better in terms of facilitating result integrity? They just don't care about that kind of thing in any sort of serious way. But to your point, at least there would be talk about, hey, man, you're really going to let it go out on this. And because of their history now, you can't really say that. Also, it just deserves to be said, DC got dropped long before the eye poke and nearly finished. That eye was initially messed up. Now, for it to go black clearly comes from the eye poke itself. I'm not saying he was almost there and then the eye poke finished him off. I think it probably hurt his vision and wasn't nearly as bad until he got poked in the eye. But still, he was on the losing end of that fight. Understand something. In the first fight, BC, Stipe got finished in the first round. In the second fight, DC basically won on the feet and then took him down and controlled him for the round. Easy 10-9 Cormier. In the third fight, you could maybe say that Stipe lost the first round if you want to count that last rally at the very, very end of that one hard right hand at the fence line. And then you could say maybe he stole the round. But Stipe was winning that round basically up until then, and maybe even still with that, okay? The tides had clearly turned between these two. Stipe was the one who continued to get better. DC did not. DC made adjustments, and I take those seriously, but the facts are what they are. You go from getting finished to losing 10-9 to basically winning outright. Again, somewhat debatable there. It shows you the progression. And he dropped him in the second, and then he clearly won the third. So for me, the point is here, it's like, yes, did the eye poke make a difference in that fight? Sure. In aggregate, a bit of a wash, and Stipe showed himself from every different phase of the game to have taken more of adjustments from the second to the third fight, and then bringing back in general what had worked between the first two. DC had a much harder time with that, so by the time he got poked in the eye, it was too little, too late anyway.
Fair, very fair. And I want to ask you this, because I'm a DC guy, and I thought he just got beat. He didn't beat himself, he just got beat. Am I surprised that he abandoned wrestling after round one and never tried again, just like in the second fight? Yes, but I think he must have known where his gas tank was and figured his best chance was to keep it on the feet. Again, shout out to Stipe for the varying of his style and his adjustments. But overall, Luke, I didn't necessarily feel like DC wanted to be in there as a whole. I didn't see that same eye of the tiger and fighting spirit of the past. I think he got frustrated when Stipe was closing his avenues to victory, and separate from that eye poke, we found out who was the better fighter in the third fight, which is what the third fight was all about and supposed to be created for. And, I just saw a frustrated DC who, the more that fight went on, it was like, we're playing it out. We're playing out the string here.
That's right. I think I also just saw a guy. He had that moment in the end of the first. Okay, that's enough to maybe on certain people's scorecards steal the round. I think I may have done it in real time, and then watching it back again, I was like, no, Stipe won that round. Clearly winning the second, nearly stopping him there, and then the third sort of running away with it, and then the fifth running away with it. And by the way, even after the eye poke, DC's best round, certainly in terms of volume and success at landing, was round 4. It was the one after he was dealing with it, which isn't to say that the eye poke helped, but still that he was able to muster some of his offense. Look, at 41 years of age, he was trying to make up for a mistake that he made in the second fight, which he did not necessarily have to. Right? He got a little lackadaisical with the threat that Stipe was, and it was too little too late when he was chasing it here at 41 years of age. Stipe continued to get better. He continued to improve. He continued to show that he was still capable of maximizing his skills and adding to them in meaningful ways. And so I really take my hat off to Stipe. I thought it was an excellent performance by him. To me, this was the best of the 3 fights. I know a lot of people disagree with that, but I really like him. You had something else to add?
I think the blood and guts of the second one made it a little bit better. I thought the ending of this fight, the last round and a half, really kind of pulled it down. But, the first 3 rounds were very exciting, intense. I just want to say this, that I felt like DC would have wrestled more if he felt comfortable that he was ahead in the fight and had built up a lead. I think the frustration that we saw, and maybe some of the people saying, like I just did, I'm not really sure DC looked like he wanted to be there, was this, Luke. He hit Stipe in this third fight with the kitchen sink. He hit him with his best Sunday punches, I thought, 2 or 3 times, and Stipe was there and he kept coming. I think that's when DC kind of realized, I can out-wrestle him and get tired here. That's not going to win me the fight. The more he saw this younger, fresher, hungrier man keep coming, I think that slowly worn down the fight inside of him. And that's all credit to Stipe, who is not just intangibles, who had the right game plan, who had the right everything in this fight. And look, it's a hell of a win. It's an absolutely huge win to kind of put on top of your career at this point for Stipe, in a career that is not ending anytime soon.
Very quickly, DC's legacy now. Is he at the second tier of all-time greats still?
Yeah, I think he is. Look, and I don't think it's wrong to say, look, he's kind of a bridesmaid historically now, and that's not taking away from his surefire Hall of Fame 2-division champion, a guy who came very close to being one of the best all time. But you lose to the man of the era twice in each division, Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. It kind of puts you in a bridesmaid role. And one thing about DC's career, his losses have come to only the very best, but there's been some real heartbreaking elements in there where, he tried his best to get over that hill and just couldn't. It doesn't mean we'll look at him any less historically, but it does mean we were right, Luke, in saying that this third fight was the most prestigious in some ways in UFC history, because had DC won this, he really could have made that final leap to the top.
I don't disagree with any of that. Jay wants us to move along. One last question on this, BC, and I'll give it to you again. Dana White was asked at the post-fight press conference, what about Jon Jones versus Stipe? Jon Jones, very active on Twitter that night in a way we hadn't seen him. Clearly interested in returning, clearly interested in competing, probably more so against DC, but still, against Stipe, he seemed to be all in. And then when White was asked about it, he was like, no, we got somebody else in mind. Okay, why are they doing this, BC? They want to save money on a Stipe versus Francis fight. They want to reduce Jones's leverage. Why wouldn't you make a Jon Jones fight against Stipe, which to me seems like the best of all possible outcomes?
Yeah, I have to go with the reduce the leverage of Jon Jones based on the public fight that Dana and Jon had before Abu Dhabi came in and we had, access to bigger money during this quarantine. The best news about this situation, and Daniel's probably never going to fight again. Everyone, including Dana, is sort of biting their lip and saying, we'll see if he doesn't want to go out on his own terms for big money. I know DC said, I only want to fight for titles. So obviously there is a scenario, by the way, where Jon Jones can become your heavyweight champion and DC could come out of retirement for one more. But put that aside, the fact that we have 3 studs right now, Stipe, Francis, and Jon Jones, that could fight each other a couple times. This is incredible news for the heavyweight division, and I do think, Luke, the right move, and I get people that are like, look, what else does Francis have to do? I'm sorry. Jon Jones is the best of all time and a giant draw. The move right now is to substitute Jon Jones in and put him against Stipe. Francis gets the winner. You cannot lose here. You cannot lose business-wise, importance-wise. These 3 are going to make some fun-ass fights. And did you see some of the early odds makers putting Francis as a potential favorite over Stipe, putting Jones as a favorite over Stipe? Very interesting stuff right there. I'd love to see any of those fights, but Jones is the fight to make right now.
Yeah, and lastly, I would just add, I wouldn't mind seeing Francis get the title shot that I do think he richly deserves. But if that's the argument the UFC is going to make, like, oh, Francis has earned it, it's like, LOL, the things you're doing in many other divisions that totally counteract that and make that argument utterly hollow.
Are you in?
This is our time. The world's changing. And you are right in the center of it.
I don't know what's ahead, but all bets are off.